I'm Mecha Random 42, and I have finally actually seen the entire movie of Halloween, 2018 version, obviously. So I have to kind of qualify my review a little bit by saying I love the kind of 80s cheesy slasher movies. Freddy is my favorite, and then Jason, and then probably Chucky, Pinhead, then Leatherface, and then Michael Myers. So Michael Myers, even though, yes, I know a lot of these go back to the 70s, especially Halloween, they all kind of fit in this late 70s to probably about 1991 or so genre of movie for me. Yeah, it's I'm gonna give you guys a non-spoilers review part of the review first, and then I'll get into some kind of mild spoilers a little bit afterwards, but I'll tell you it'll be clearly marked. So, what did I think of it? It wasn't as bad as it could have been. Now, this being said, it really felt like there was like two different movies, and then like a side bit that probably could have been cut out. And I'll get more into like the little bit that could have probably been cut out in another part. The beginning section of the movie, without going into spoilers, felt very similar to kind of like the Rob Zombie remakes, sort of, or the remake, the more brutal. It was almost a little too brutal for me. I found myself looking away a few of the murder scenes in this movie, until we got to kind of the second part of the movie, the second half, the back half. Then it really felt a little bit more like I was expecting from a Halloween sequel. Now, this movie also is basically a direct sequel to the first movie from 1978, which sort of retcons all the rest that came after, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, really. But like I said, they're kind of my least favorite in the horror genre of the slasher movies. And yeah, I was really kind of almost confused about who would be watching this. And I did predict on our last Goddesses of Gore horror podcast over on Midnight's Edge After Dark that this seemed like it would be big with kind of the Dead by Daylight crowd. It's if you guys don't know what that is, Dead by Daylight is kind of a video game where you have one person as the killer, and then other people as the people he's chasing after, and there's little missions and tasks. It's very similar to kind of the Friday the 13th game, and you can play as Michael Myers, and that's kind of what it really felt like. It was like really aimed towards this sort of 20-something audience, maybe like 15 to 28 sort of year old audience here. And it kind of felt a little bit, especially in the very beginning, like I had almost, I'm like not the demographic for this. I love kind of the more cartoony, funny deaths of like the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and even getting into the Jason movies, even the later ones, which are kind of ridiculous and crazy, but some of those deaths are more comical and a little less brutal and realistic. And I think for me, for my own personal taste, it almost got a little too brutal and realistic, and it almost got a little too much of, I really feel bad for the people on screen instead of I'm watching a guy in a mask kill a bunch of teenagers, because that really wasn't the case so much in this movie, which I'll get into a little bit more in the spoiler section. And yeah, there's a much higher body count than a lot of the other movies. And my concern with this is it kind of seems to be aimed more towards the kind of cell phone generation where, but that's where it confused me a little too, because if you're on your phone, you will miss half of this movie. You will miss key plot points. You will miss details. It is very darkly lit because it does take place at night, so you're going to miss a few things if you're on your phone watching this movie. But that kind of seems to be the people that they're sort of throwing at least the first chunk of the movie at. Now for me, I was fine with the pacing. I was fine with it being a little slower. I don't know. This one doesn't really sit that well with me as far as the Halloween movies. Yeah, like I would almost recommend just watching the first one if you're going to be watching a horror movie. Unless you are such a huge fan of the franchise and have to see every single movie in the theater, or you really, really love the Rob Zombie ones, I would probably say watch this one. You'd probably like it. It kind of feels so much more to me like the Rob Zombie ones. Yeah, and I don't know if that's a good thing for me. I don't know. I think I might just prefer the other genre personally. It might just be a matter of personal preference here. So I think my kind of score on this one, I don't know. I'm probably going to give it about a 6 out of 10. And I'll probably qualify that by saying I don't think I'm going to watch it again. I don't think this will ever be a review or a rewatch. I can watch the original. I can watch Nightmare on Elm Street. I can watch all of those movies over and over a million times. I don't think I can watch this one again. I don't think it really did anything that I care about seeing. You know, I would almost say I would rather watch Return of the Living Dead Rave to the Grave another time before I give this one a rewatch, because at least that had some of the stuff that for me personally, I kind of like a little bit of levity and a little bit of humor, a little bit of ridiculous stuff in my horror movies. So I would probably sooner watch that again than this. I'm gonna I don't know. I was thinking about a 6 out of 10 before I started to do the review, and now that I'm really thinking about it, I gotta go right down the middle, right about a 5. It's not a bad movie. It didn't piss me off, it didn't annoy me, but it doesn't give me what I want out of a horror movie and out of like a slasher movie from these big franchises. It really felt a lot more about like the modern horror stuff that I'm not a huge fan of. So yeah, right in the middle, 5 out of 10. And I wish I could give it a better score. I really wanted to like this. I really wanted this to be the thing that got me super excited for these modern horror movies, or for like a new generation of slasher movies. Yeah, and I guess I'm just not the hugest fan of the modern horror stuff. So that's the spoiler-free section. Now we'll get into some mild spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, or you don't care, you know, whatever. If you don't care, keep watching. If you don't want any spoilers, it's going to be mild spoilers anyway. I'm not going to give you like the huge stuff. Just go ahead, go watch the movie first, then come back. Right, so spoilery time. So Michael Myers he's in his loony bin, and of course you have these reporters who come in, and they're kind of the most interesting people in the movie. They're British sort of reporters. They end up with a mask for some reason. They're trying to provoke a response out of Michael. They're in kind of an outside sort of courtyard with all the other lunatics, and everybody else kind of senses the power of this mask. It's like they feed off of the evil of the mask and of Michael Myers. And of course he's stone silent, no reaction, nothing when he's around the mask, but all the other loonies are. So that kind of sets up the tone of the movie a little bit into like what I call the first part of the movie, the torture porn part of the movie. And we do get a little bit of like, we see Jamie Lee Curtis, she's kind of a nuts PTSD sort of survivalist sort of person out in the middle of nowhere with guns and a giant panic room sort of thing. And so we get, she's also got a daughter who she's estranged from, and a granddaughter who looks about 35, in my opinion. That was another thing that really bothered me about this movie. The granddaughter looks so much older than she should be. She kind of looks like she's about 5 years younger than the daughter. And the daughter's Judy Greer. She's probably about 40, I would say, because Jamie Lee Curtis is in her 60s now. Yeah, Man, and she was kind of a bitch. She was okay for a bit, but she ended up being kind of a bitch. This granddaughter character, not any of the others. And even Judy Greer's character, the daughter, was a little bit of a bitch. But apparently she was removed from the house as a kid because Laurie was training her. Jamie Lee Curtis' character, Laurie Strode, comes back. She's survived the original movie, so this is a direct sequel to the original. So she's got this kid who got taken away because she's basically training her a la Sarah Connor, John Connor in Terminator 2. And yeah, I don't know how I feel about that aspect of the movie. They could have just made it about Michael going back to Laurie. They wouldn't have needed to steal so much from Terminator 2 in a lot of those respects. But that being said, that part of the movie, that movie within the movie with, Laurie, her family, that was probably the most interesting part. Like, that could have been its own movie by itself, and you've got, like, the reporter part of the movie, which is another movie entirely. And, of course, you've got the granddaughter and her teenage friends that could have been just completely cut out. That's kind of like movie C, which could just be completely cut out. The granddaughter doesn't really need to have all of her stupid friend interaction. You don't need the friend going and babysitting and getting killed from being a babysitter, blah, blah, blah. You didn't need any of that in this movie. I don't know. So you've got basically got like 2 movies and then a side part that could have been cut out. And this movie could have easily been like an hour and 15 minutes. I don't think it would have hurt to be that short. I don't know. and I guess to get more into spoilers, the two reporters, you've got a man and a woman reporter. They interview Laurie and find out she's kind of crazy. So even you could have had those two parts of the movie. You could have had them interview her, but the part where they're getting murdered and everything was so much more brutal than a Halloween movie should be. You know, you've got the scene in the bathroom that you see in all the trailers where the woman reporter is getting basically murdered. Her friend comes in, and like that was kind of a little too much for me. Even like the bathroom scene where he's just getting his head slammed over and over and over again, that was a little too much for me. And I prefer my deaths to be comical and kind of stupid. I don't want to feel bad for the people on screen in a stupid horror movie. And I know that this is so probably like a weird response from somebody who does love the old slasher genre. But keep this in mind, I never got into the Saw movies, I never got into the Hostel sort of movies, I never watched any of those because I don't like the really super brutal, realistic stuff. And yeah, some of the deaths were a little too brutal. I mean, there's the sort of Dr. Loomis character, when he gets murdered in here. We are in the spoiler section, but when the guy who's kind of a Dr. Loomis character, he's not Dr. Loomis, but he's kind of a Dr. Loomis character, he gets murdered, Jason can just stomp his, or Jason. See, this is what it does. It reminds me of Jason. Michael Myers has the strength of Jason in this movie. So that's why I'm thinking of Jason. And I also, if you guys can't see my monitor is all the slashers playing poker. You know, it's Michael Myers and Freddy and Leatherface and Jason and Chucky. And yeah. So this is why I'm looking right at Jason Voorhees as I'm doing this review. But yeah, Michael Myers stomps this sort of Dr. Loomis-y kind of doctor, who's not Dr. Loomis, but he might as well be. Stomps him on the head, and just with no force, no nothing, just like his head is made out of Jello. And Michael Myers is a guy. He's not a kind of supernatural being like Jason. And this is one of the issues I had with this movie, is Michael seems a little too strong. He seems a little too inhuman. He has too much strength for being a guy. And I think some of the later movies, it's been a long time since I've seen the later Halloween movies, I think they did kind of keep amping him up to kind of compete with Freddy and Jason. Freddy and Jason are supernatural beings, though. Freddy is a dream boogeyman. He kills you in your dreams. The rules of the real world don't apply. Jason is kind of, for lack of a better term, he's almost a deadite. He's an undead sort of creature that just keeps going. And I guess in my head I can justify Jason. He's too simple to know he's dead in a lot of ways. And those movies, I can kind of justify those guys having a lot more strength than Michael Myers. Oh, and that's kind of another reason why Michael Myers was always one of my least favorite, because he was just a guy, but he had all these superpowers. You can stab him, you can shoot him. I remember the Halloween H2O trailer, you know, it used to go, oh, he's been stabbed, shot, burned, you know, all these things. And I'm like, okay, but it's Michael Myers, it's not Jason. So that's one of the things that kind of always killed it for me for this franchise as well, is that they kind of keep breaking their own rules quite a bit. Not so much as like the Jason movies, and certainly, well, even the Freddy movies had their moments, but the Freddy movies for me had a really clear, consistent, almost set of rules, and they had a clear set of, you know, part 1 and then part 3, 4, 5 are really related to each other. Part 2 was kind of they didn't know the rules yet on Nightmare on Elm Street, but I can talk a lot more about Nightmare on Elm Street than the Michael Myers movies. So yeah, that's kind of where I am on this one. It's not a bad movie. I just don't think I'm gonna watch it again. Did you guys see it? What are your thoughts in the full? And you know, if you do get into spoilers in the comments section, I think this is the video to do it in. But also try and tag it spoilers so you don't spoil it for anybody else if they do want to see it. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. It's not terrible. It's not great. I'm probably not gonna watch it again. I'm glad I saw it. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad I saw it so I can talk about it, because it is horror. It is kind of one of my genres that I really, really love, especially the 80s slasher movies, even though it goes back to the 70s. But yeah, tell me what you guys thought now that I finally saw it, and I did have a much better experience this time watching it. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next live stream or video. Bye!